Welcome to the 15th episode of the Triple Takeover Toycast. My name is Sixo, but more on that later.
A lot later.
Flipping it, lads. I think I'm going to have to pack this in, because if I keep talking this slowly, we'll all be applying for bus passes by the time we get to the end of the episode. So enough with the prolonged and ponderous monologuing, and let's get cracking, shall we? With me today are two extremely incorrigible and enabling co-hosts, which I suppose is all you can wish for in a podcast about toys, after all. First up is the Nordic Transformers community's most famous, not to mention most handsome face. It's M.A.S.K from Transformers Square One.
Oh, I'll take it this week. Hey.
There you go. I thought I'd be nice to you this week.
I'll take it. We're already there.
Yeah, indeed. And next we have a man who, from the looks of things, doesn't so much have a toy display that he does a major trip hazard. Get the risk assessments out, folks. It's Liam from Toybox Soapbox.
This is why I'm not allowed children.
Is that right? Nowhere for them to go, just on the pile of toys.
That's it, because as we said earlier, I am the Ayatollah of crapola, so that's it.
There you go, absolutely. Together we are Triple Takeover, and for once we're here to prove that we can talk about toys that aren't over 3 decades old, with the focus being firmly on the newest series in the Transformers franchise. How bizarre. It's Kingdom. So, how are you both doing, lads? All right?
Yeah, really good actually, thanks. I'm on brand. I've literally... and less than an hour ago, had a Kingdom toy delivered.
I noticed, mate. Yeah, I saw you've been posting about it on the old Twitter already.
Yeah, and it plays into the show because it's two characters who are not even in the show.
which I'm sure we're going to talk about tonight. Yeah, there's some notable omissions in that cartoon.
Are you sure there's not like a Netflix program about some gangster that you didn't get sidetracked watching instead of like doing your notes for this episode?
No.
You positive it's a Kingdom toy that's been delivered, not some WWF wrestler figure?
No, but you wait till I tell you about that documentary about that female boxer lady who got stabbed loads of times and shot and then got up.
That's next episode, right?
Yeah.
It's your topic next time. You can.
That's the spin-off.
You can go for it. Yeah.
What crap has Liam been watching on Netflix?
Which ones did you get delivered? Was it Skywarp and Sideswipe? Was it?
Yep, Skywarp and Sideswipe. Skywarp is a retool of Eraser, an incredible mold, and Sideswipe is a retool of himself.
There you go. All right. Well, the long-awaited Earth mode Sideswipe, I guess. Which, well, that's a whole other topic, isn't it?
And just to set a tease, Sideswipe has an Earth mode, unlike anything in the show. Again,
yeah, well, that's what I mean.
So.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, whole topic there. That's a whole avenue for discussion, isn't it? How about you, Maz? How are you doing?
I'm not too bad, thank you very much. I am still reeling from how much I got away with that intro, and I'm just waiting for it to catch up with me later in the episode. But for now, I feel lucky.
No, mate. We've got to be nice to you occasionally, after all. Do you know what I mean? Unless there's a pillow nearby or something. I don't know.
There you go.
Yeah. You tempted fate, mate. You tempted fate.
When we were doing our Patreon Minnesota the other day, Sixo says, out of nowhere, he says, Maz is right. And it took me a little while. It was ticking over in my head. And I was thinking, because like the sub-tagline of this show is normally Maz's wrong opinions. And and it's actually just popped into my head. Like, I can't believe we didn't pick you up on it then.
What, on me saying that Maz was right? Even a stop clock and all of that.
It's frozen in Iceland.
That's what the patrons pay for my correct opinions.
Is that the avenue for you to be correct then, behind the paywall?
Yeah. Open free access just gets the wrong ones, yeah.
Right.
I'm sure I'm full of them tonight on this topic, right?
Yeah, indeed. So, well, speaking of the topic at hand, I mean, before we get there, I should mention that, of course, this episode is sponsored by the wonderful TF Sauce. So we'll do a little bit of a thing about them in the middle of the episode. But once again, they've very kindly sponsored the pod, and we're very grateful for it as well. So do have a look at tfsauce.com for all your Transformers needs, unofficial and third party. So do check that out. And they've got plenty of Kingdom toys in stock as well. So, Liam, maybe you'll be taking advantage of that later. Who's to say? You probably got them all already, right?
Depends how much of this beer I get through.
Yeah, exactly. Well, maybe you'll have enabled yourself on a few by the end of the episode. Who's to say?
Why not?
Right, so Kingdom just been on the old telly, hasn't it? So in the old Netflix. Everybody watched it, I assume.
Yeah,
I have.
Maz, you made a bit of a concerted effort, really, didn't you? Because you weren't necessarily going to tune in. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think it went something like I'm not interested, lads. I'm not going to watch it. And then, what was it, like 3 hours later, 4 a.m, I was like, okay, I've watched it.
I know.
It's a classic of Maz's statement.
Yeah.
Absolutely was. Is when you just suddenly sent a message saying, okay, I've watched it. And we were like, oh, okay. When? When did you do that? Just in one sitting, presumably.
Instead of sleeping, yeah.
So, I mean, well, firstly, did you watch it on 1.25 speed or whatever the recommendation typically is? Have you seen that?
I wish I'd known that earlier.
Or in Japanese.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I did try the old 1.25 speed. I heard that as a joke and I did try it. And actually it does work. I'm not even like, that's not even me being facetious or like having a dig at the pace of the show or anything. It's actually a fairly, brisk but decent pace if you do just notch it up a little bit like that. It kind of works. Because, I know I was taking the mickey out of it at the start there, but it is a little bit pondering at times, it's fair to say. Although I'm going to come right out and say it just to make sure that, kind of setting the tone and all of that this isn't going to be, I hope anyway, a complete, what's the word I'm looking for? A roasting of Kingdom. The aim is not to just sit and give it a kicking, but just, really kind of appraise what's going on in the wonderful world of Transformers right now. And for my part, I actually kind of ended up enjoying some bits of it, if I'm being honest. Like, not everything worked for me, but I thought there was some good stuff in there. I preferred it of all three of the parts of WFC, War for Cybertron. I think it was the best.
By far, the first two parts. You know what I'm like? I tend to find the positive in almost all these things. And even I will say Siege and Earthrise were awful. And I really disliked them. But Kingdom, it's definitely the best one of the three. That's one of the positives. But it's got a coherent story. That's how, not to spoil the episode already, but it does a lot of things right that the other ones don't. And even though a lot of the same problems still show up throughout, it's lessened by having a story that makes sense.
I kind of agree. I suppose it is worth saying at this stage that, yes, spoilers for Kingdom and the whole of War for Cybertron. If indeed you've not actually watched the shows and you are worried about spoilers, then why are you listening to a podcast on it, I guess. But we will be revealing a few plot points along the way, I'm sure. But yeah, Liam, I completely agree with you. I think the fact that, for me, Earthrise especially, just kind of thinking of the trilogy as a whole, Siege, I think, had the kind of novelty factor to it that at least it was new, so that there was stuff that, maybe you could kind of see it, that it was a problem, but at least it was still new. So it was only 6 episodes, it was a bit of a slog at times. But Earthrise, for me, I'll be honest, I found it almost to the point of unwatchable. I've honestly tuned out of various bits of it just because it was so slow and pondering and just kind of nonsensical and just things happening where you're like, why? Why is that? What does that relate to? And there were some bits of Kingdom that I thought actually, if anything, kind of didn't necessarily do justice to Earthrise, but maybe we'll touch on that later. But I will say for Kingdom, just as a separate entity, I thought the storyline was all right actually, and kind of propelled it forward a little bit.
It's funny as well because when you watch it, it doesn't feel like you actually need to know what happened, because the only thing that's relevant at all is the Allspark, and they must tell you that story 14,000 times throughout the show anyway. So all the other stuff, it sounds extreme what you're saying about Earthrise, but it was that bad. There's so much of it, like even stuff like it being called Earthrise, but they don't get Earth modes or anything, even though the toy line is based around them all having Earth modes. But then Skylinks turns up magically in a more accurate space shuttle than his toy, because it's even got the heat shield and stuff. So all this extra detailing. It's really there's just so much of that in Earthrise and Siege where you're watching it going, why are they doing this? Why are they talking so slowly? What is happening?
You were just saying not needing to have watched the others, and of course I haven't watched the other two. I was initially a little bit confused about Galvatron's role in things, and I didn't know whether I was watching people having hallucinations or whether they were flashbacks. I couldn't tell that initially, and I felt like having missed the Dead Universe stuff, that was a bit lost on me as well. But obviously they explained it, we traveled through the Dead Universe back in time or something like that, and it just seemed to be a little bit of a MacGuffin that helped solve the questions I had in the episodes. But it wasn't a barrier to enjoyment. It probably acted the opposite for me, whereas because I saw the trailers for Kingdom, and I think I had to say it very quietly, like, I actually quite thought it looked really good. And maybe that's just because I had just finished watching some Beast Wars episodes as well for our Beast Wars podcast episode. So that kind of played into it nicely. I thought, okay, well, I quite like the idea of seeing the Beast Wars cast next to
same.
the WFC cast. So what it's left me with is actually thinking, okay, so there are story elements that I didn't have any background for. So maybe I'll go back and watch the other two. But obviously,
Don't do it.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like one of those where I read a good comic and I realize that there were things I have gaps in my knowledge of the backstory. And because everyone's reading the cool comic, the good one, and then I go back and read everything that led up to it, and it's just nowhere near as good, and you're just sort of ticking off things that happened in the past. Whereas you should just stick with that amount of knowledge that the good series gave you. So maybe that's just, it's given me a thirst for watching Transformers cartoons again, and it always happens whenever I don't watch Transformers media for ages, and then I start watching something. I actually remember, man, I really love watching Transformers cartoons. I really love it, whatever it is.
That sense really comes through in this one, I think.
I think so. I enjoyed it. I mean, I was willing to stay up later and later. I could quite easily have watched the rest of the episodes on another day, but I just felt like watching it all in one go. So it was a positive thing for me, honestly.
Yeah, I think so much of that rings true for me. I think that you're right, Liam, actually, what you were saying about stuff like the two things I thought didn't work so well in Kingdom was, and it's all the stuff from previous parts, was the Dead Universe and the Allspark. And that for me were two of the kind of weaker elements, if you like. The Dead Universe doesn't really factor in all that much, but even then when they're trying to get back to Cybertron and they're like going through the Dead Universe or whatever, I was a bit like, there would have been a simpler way to do all of this, really. Do you know what I mean? To get them from point A to B, it was kind of a bit, as you said, a bit of a MacGuffin.
It felt like they had to. It felt like they were forcing themselves to do it because they kept talking about it. Because in Earthrise, it's one episode, isn't it? The Dead, and like you're saying there about, you felt like you'd missed something with Galvatron. It's almost blinking, you miss it, isn't it? In that episode,
it is.
He's literally very few scenes, and he's probably got more to do in this show, and he's not even in this one that much.
He's definitely got more to do in this one for sure, and he's a lot more kind of present in this one, that's true of a number of things. I think the thing with the Allspark was that I found that episode in Kingdom that really focused on the Allspark. It's got Ultra Magnus in it and all of that. That for me was the worst one by far, because I just felt that it suddenly like lagged. It was like actually it was moving at a fairly brisk pace, particularly the first kind of three episodes or so, and then it was like you suddenly get this lull where it goes all kind of mystical, kind of mumbo jumbo. And I was really thinking long and hard about this, about what my problem with it was, because it's not that it's mysticism, because actually I think we've had very, very excellently done examples of mysticism in Transformers before that have worked well. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the G1 comic, for example, and that's got tons of mysticism in it. But I just felt that this was really, I don't know, like unearned somehow. It kind of like, how does the Allspark work really? Like, how does it tie into everything? It's not really, it's just kind of, I don't know, it just smacks of being like a bit convenient. Like, and then obviously the fact that, all the dead characters turn up at the end and just make the baddies disappear. It's like, that felt like a bit of a contrivance to me. I just kind of, that didn't feel like the kind of ultimate peak of the storyline, if you like. Definitely,
the mysticism stuff, I know exactly what you mean, because when you say it feels unearned, that's exactly right, because even though they're talking about the Allspark, the only time it seems to feature is when it needs to do something. So
exactly.
When it has to act as the point of agency or something in the plot, and it's something like it can do something, but it's never defined in any way. It doesn't have like any clear set of rules that you can look at it and go, it can do this, it has this power. It's just catch-all, it gives life to everything. What does that mean? Does it bring people back? Does it do stuff? And it's like, no, it just gives life to everything. Everything's built on it. And then that episode, like you say, I felt with the mysticism thing as well. That one feels like it stops the plot dead, because you go from Optimus Prime jogging around the Stranger Things wood like that, and then the next minute you've got 20 minutes of him struggling to get through a door, and that's basically all that plot is, of him arguing with a ghost outside a door. And
well, that's it.
About mysticism, and you're like, I don't know. You feel like anything that's been built up, all the momentum suddenly stopped there without any real explanation. It doesn't feel like there's a dramatic point that it's built to, where you're like, wow, this is important for these characters.
Do you think that's that comes from lots of well-known and celebrated science fiction stories and series where, when the story does start getting to the business end of things, there are occasions where the main protagonist suddenly has this sort of either a vision, or it goes into their head, or has to deal with demons of the past, and it gets done in in a sci-fi way where they seem to be in this ethereal space or this kind of another plane of existence, and then something needs to be solved before it goes forward. And then they've just adopted that because all the sci-fi that the writers and the fans have grown up with has always had that sort of element. I was thinking of things like Babylon 5 or Star Trek or, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think there's I mean, I think you're absolutely on the money. I think there's a lot of that, isn't there? That kind of internal struggle. And to be fair, that representation of Optimus doesn't not work for me. I mean, again, thinking back to the G1 comic especially, that's very reminiscent of that version of Prime, actually, kind of being stuck in his head, and really kind of, doubting himself and whatever else. I don't know, there was just something about the way that this episode was written in particular that just felt like, as you said, Liam, it just kind of stopped the overall plot dead, really, and kind of dumped a load of the characters on the sideline and just kind of, spent too much time spinning its wheels almost.
It's funny because if you sort of step back from it, like I was saying about it's an episode about Optimus trying to get through a door, but then when you go to the other characters, it's Optimus Primal walking in circles around, knocking on the wall, and you take these little bits, and this is basically all that's happening whilst the mystical mumbo jumbo's going on. But if you jumping ahead, but if you go to the bit where it's sort of explained, the Allspark tells Optimus that he has to just give up and hand it over. You're like, there's nothing throughout the show. There's no struggle within Optimus where he's going through, where it builds up to this, where it's like a moment where you go, yes, this makes sense. This is built. You see him, he's learned something. It's just literally like he's been told to do something, so he does it. And
yeah.
But it's and that's what we're saying about the mystical mumbo jumbos. It feels very much like the Allspark is just there to deliver these, do this, do that. It's the thing that moves stuff without building throughout the show, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Nothing in the previous two shows that sort of supported that looked like a long-running thread. You felt like that just popped into the third series.
Well, the thread really is that Optimus removes the Allspark from Cybertron at the start, in the first series, and that, kind of condemns Cybertron to the fate that you see at the end of Kingdom. But I don't know how well that kind of necessarily ties together. Do you know what I mean? And realistically, it should have been about him getting back to Cybertron. And I almost feel like if they'd have got back to Cybertron sooner and spent more time on Cybertron, it would have made the finale a little bit less rushed as well. Do you know what I mean? And had a bit more time to kind of... I actually enjoyed the finale as a whole, but I do feel like they kind of... they had a lot to get through in that last episode.
That's so funny. I actually thought that the whole thing went on for one episode too long. When they went through the portal, I thought that was the end of the series, and I thought that's a great cliffhanger, and I would have been super satisfied if that was it. But then there's the Den Universe, then they crash. It's almost like they're back to square one, and everything that's been built up is at zero, and it felt like a really unnatural, forced trough in the emotional roller coaster of the whole thing.
Right.
I just felt like it should have ended one episode early and then pick up maybe in the next show or something like that. But definitely felt like,
interesting.
This is continuing? That felt weird.
It does feel like that last episode doesn't need to be there, because as soon as they go through the portal or whatever it is that takes them back to Cybertron, and Starscream is saying no, it feels like stop there, and then it leads into the next series.
Absolutely. That would have been a perfect ending for me, I think.
Yeah, I could see that.
That last episode feels like the first episode of a new series, because there's only jumped in there, and then Galvatron and Nemesis Prime turn up, who you've barely seen at any point. They've, I think they appeared in the previous episode, didn't they? Oh no, it's that episode, isn't it? Galvatron pops back. He's mostly just in Megatron's head.
Mm-hmm.
But there you're like, oh, suddenly these characters have come in, and there's all the struggles that Elita 1 and Jetfire go through in season 1 and 2, and then they're taken off the board.
I was just going to say that was my number one kind of biggest problem with that, was the discovering. I mean, we kind of knew that Elita 1 was dead from the end of Earthrise anyway. You see, basically at the end of Earthrise, Maz, you see her in a big explosion, like the whole of Shockwave's lab blows up. And I guess you could say, oh, it was obvious that she's dead because, she's tied to a table or whatever. How would she have got out of there? But it's never 100% confirmed. And I guess the really kind of mad thing about revealing that, yes, okay, she is actually dead, is that it implies anyway that all of the other characters in that scene are also dead. And so therefore, what was the point of all of the storyline in Earthrise set on Cybertron? It's just completely meaningless.
The passage of time is really short as well, comparatively. There's nothing to say. Even though the show is, the toy line is about time and space jumping about, and the Beast Wars cast, they've gone back in time to this time. So they've literally only left and gone to Earth, and it must be a matter of, you could say, months. But again, you see Jetfire, and you just feel sad for him, because it's like he's avoided Earth this time, but the snow's still come for him into space. It's like, Final Destination is always destined to be killed by snow somewhere, because that's what Cybertron is suddenly covered in snow.
I hadn't thought of it that way, honestly. That's What a reading, man. God. Final destination Jetfire. There you go.
It stalked him across the cosmos.
That's his trope now, is it forever destined to be killed in the snow.
That's what the IDW comic will just be him hearing a voice saying, "You had better pay up to Mr. Frosty Jetfire." That's it.
Why doesn't Liam write these cartoons, honestly? Like, they'd be so entertaining.
Pay me Netflix. Pay me them Netflix books.
But no, I do think you're right. I think the fact that, Alita is just found in the snow like that, I didn't like that much, I must admit. I didn't care for it. And I also didn't really, just because it really did kind of annihilate the storyline from Earthrise for me, what there was. Like, it really didn't feel like there was any point to the stuff that you'd then seen set on Cybertron, like everything they were trying to do, because you just know that at the end they all get killed. So, and I'm not saying that there isn't still a benefit to watching something that ends in a tragedy, but it literally has no impact, does it, on the overall storyline from what I can tell, then, everything that they do.
That's it. Like, when you see it, you're like, initially you're like, it's for shock value. You're like, it's this. It's going to do something to Optimus, but it doesn't. He just kind of he's upset for 30 seconds, then drives on, and he doesn't seem like he's driven by Elita 1's death at all. It doesn't seem to play in until she comes back as a ghost and as a chat. That's about it. Yeah,
in a funny way, though, I kind of feel like it was a bit of an awkward one anyway. The whole kind of women in refrigerators trope, of that whole thing of if you've not seen it, of Green Lantern being motivated because his girlfriend was killed and stuffed in a fridge. And it's
classic issue, that.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And it's become a bit of a classic trope, hasn't it, for male characters being motivated by the death of their girlfriend or what have you. And it did kind of feel a little bit like that's what they were trying to do here. And she's literally not so much in a fridge, but in the snow at least. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's just a bit on the nose for my liking. But it was a shame. I don't know. That bit didn't really work for me, I've got to say.
Yeah. But there's so much of that in this, like we were saying there, where stuff feels unearned. And it's like that, where these things happen, but they don't feel like they motivate the characters at the same time. Because, like we're saying there, from Optimus just goes on, and he talks about it, but you don't feel like he's really driven by the death of all of his friends. That because he sees Elita 1, and surely he then sees the ghosts of Jetfire and whoever, Ultra Magnus and people like that. And
Liam, it's because he has to get to the building.
The building.
Yeah, I mean that's what's happening on Earth, isn't it? Like, he has to get to the building, where the Allspark is in, and then on Cybertron he has to get to the building where the Allspark is there as well.
It's basically like he's playing King of the Hill on Halo, isn't he? He's just got to get there and take control. But there's so much of that. Like, you see the ghosts and stuff, all these characters, and Ultra Magnus keeps coming up, but you never feel like he's genuinely really affected by that. That's never an impression I get from these characters. They just seem to, and I know it's a cartoon, but it's really weird because they keep bringing up Ultra Magnus or Elita 1 and stuff like that. Like, when he sees Elita 1 as a ghost, or there's the Allspark, because it keeps manifesting. Even though it doesn't seem to know he's Optimus Prime, but it chooses things that only Optimus Prime would know.
Yeah.
Do they not feature in the previous series? Because obviously seeing all these ghosts in Kingdom made me think that, okay, well, I've missed their deaths then, so I've missed their storylines and how that ended, and seeing Jetfire as well. So did they not feature in the previous series to any significant degree then?
Oh no, they did. They were quite big characters. That's why it's really weird that they have, the first two series, they keep going. Well, the first series, they're all together. The second series, it keeps going between Cybertron, doesn't it, and the ARC crew. There are Elita 1, Red Alert, Jetfire and co are doing other stuff on Cybertron. And that's why it's really weird that in Season 3, you never come back to this, because you never feel like their plotline is resolved in any way, anything they were doing.
Well, it's not, as I say, it's kind of like, you literally, half of Earthrise, as Liam says, is set on Cybertron. And so all of that stuff that happens on Cybertron ends in an explosion, and then you find out that they're dead in the end of Kingdom. Yeah. So it's kind of like, oh, okay, cool. Just a bit of a weird one. So, but I do see your point about the last episode feeling like a different show. It was almost like they just had so much to wrap up from the rest of the trilogy that they really kind of rushed through it a little bit, I guess, which is a bit of a shame, because actually I thought there were some really cool ideas in there. I did like the stuff with Galvatron, actually. If some of the stuff I liked, and I suppose this is probably one of them, more in theory than in terms of actual execution. So I did like the kind of foreboding nature of Megatron finding out his future. I thought that kind of theme of that really worked for me. I really loved that whole notion of he was born kind of into servitude or what have you, then rose up out of it, and now he's going to go back and be a slave in his future. And that whole kind of, sort of that fear of, you could sort of sense that wasn't what he wanted, and that kind of dilemma, I suppose, for Megatron. I thought that kind of worked quite nicely in the final episode, and actually kind of made sense for me as a reason for him to kind of join the forces with the Autobots and the Maximals and everything.
I like the way he had that realization and then was shot off a cliff straight away. That made me laugh when I rewatched it again. He's suddenly like, "No, I'm taking control of my destiny." Then just like, and he goes flying off the cliff.
That's true, actually.
There's a moment, but that thing, it really came through on a second viewing. Actually, I was going to mention that is Megatron. He feels like he's a prisoner of his own destiny, and that feels like what his real story is throughout. Like he really does feel like he's just tormented by being something he doesn't want to be, but at the same time he is something he doesn't want to be, because he keeps, he sees himself as the freer of Cybertron and stuff like that, and when I think he's slowly realizing that he's not that, and then he sees what he's going to become as a slave anyway, it then doesn't justify the means to him, I suppose, in the end.
Yeah, exactly. I actually think that on the whole, even taking it across the three shows, I really feel like Megatron was actually a character that worked very well on the whole, and I feel like it was a really successful portrayal of, classic G1 Megatron, if you like, under a kind of new light. They took some inspiration, I think, from the comic, as I say, the G1 comic in some ways, the kind of whole kind of gladiatorial aspect and all of that in his backstory. But I really feel like they made him not sympathetic in any way, but they made him a little bit more three-dimensional almost. Not just, it didn't feel like he was doing this just for the hell of it, like it felt like there was a kind of reason to his mission almost, which is something that you don't get in every Transformers cartoon, it's fair to say.
Exactly. Then you had like the Matrix was making him more and more crazy as well, and I quite like that a little bit. It reminded me a lot of Thunderwing in the Marvel comics, where he was just going mad with the Matrix, but there was a lot of that, but it was quite subtly done through it, where you didn't pick up on it at first and it came to the fore later. But I like the way it was amplifying his, like, almost like not like a drug addict as such, but it was, he couldn't stop. He always wanted more. And, and so that manifests as how he's trying to free Cybertron and the steps he was taking, like melting down his own mates to make a spaceship, because he always wanted more. He always had to go further and further. And then I noticed with the Matrix was making him do that as well. He was always like, no, I need more. And then he's going back and reading more of Time, even though he's been told it could screw up the future and stuff. And it just feels like it's just amplifying all those effects. Or personality change, should I say.
No, definitely.
The Transformers will return after these messages.
So it's time for that bit of the episode where we talk a little bit about our sponsor, which is tfsource.com. And as ever, we're going to take a little look at their site and see what they've got going on at the moment. Because if you've never been to TF Source, they've got all kinds of Transformers toys. I mean, have they got you covered? They've got third-party stuff. They've got some vintage items as well. They've got all of the kind of new stuff from like 3.0 and exciting things like that. Loads of Kingdom toys and WFC toys and some weird and wonderful stuff on there as well. I'm looking on there at the moment, Liam, in particular at that Toilet Bots set. Didn't know if that might be your kind of thing.
I was waiting.
He's getting tagged on Twitter now with any remotely toilet-related product. It's like, oh, Liam, check this out.
I'm so happy.
I'm changing my username to Toilet Box.
Toilet Box.
Because I'm becoming a toilet guy.
Bog Box.
I can't even remember how it started. But yes, I've seen those third-party toilets. I have no inclination to buy them, people.
You can't remember how it started. It was you saying, oh, I thought I've been looking for a toilet from Masters of the Universe. Wait, why would Masters of the Universe have a toilet?
The Ghostbusters toilet, wasn't it? If it was okay, yeah.
Jurassic Park needs. Old toy bog, soap bog.
It must happen once a week now that somebody tags me in, oh, Leo, have you seen this transforming toilet or this other toilet toy? I'm like, there was a model kit the other week, like really accurate toilet model kit.
Well, drawing you back to the sponsor segment, there is a set of toilet bots on the front page of TF Source there. They're doing the rounds at the moment. I keep getting tagged on social media and people tagging me in those toilet bots, and I'm like, I ain't buying them.
Welcome to my world.
Do you know what I mean? But, it's fun for people that might want them. They are there. Anything else that's taking your fancy at the moment? I've got my eye on that new X-Transbots Deathsaurus. I think that looks pretty amazing. They've got a pre-order up for that at the moment on TF Source.
I think for me, and it was unexpected and annoying, is the... I don't know if they've actually put a pre-order on, but looking at the front page, I'm seeing like a couple of Diaclone items, and then obviously we've just had that powered convoy reveal today. And I was like, I don't want to go there, but it looks amazing.
The second I saw it on Twitter, had to tag you in it. I knew. I knew.
I mean, it's just great, isn't it? It looks amazing. And also, I never got a chance to have a go with the Battle Convoy G-Max. And, that just looks fantastic. And that with the Powered Convoy gear, it's just, I would normally be all over that.
I'm actually sat here with the Battle Convoy by my foot, waiting to review it, believe it or not, from TF Source. So there you go.
But I think I mentioned it last time, but I think it's the Fans Hobby M.A.K Tyranno, the Armada Megatron.
Yeah.
That's every time they post a video of that, I'm more into it. And especially that really satisfying one where you could press down the button and push his shoulder treads in. I've watched that one repeat. So
yeah, that looks cool.
That's
cool.
something that catches my eye on the page as well.
Interesting, I noticed they've got Scorponok up again for old Earthrise Scorponok for in stock. They've got him back in stock, so that's a possibility.
So he's not still down that hole where he was supposed to transform.
Yeah,
it's not the last of the Scorponoks then.
Yeah, but yeah, he's back in stock on TF Source.
I'm quite looking forward to Kingdom Pipe on top of it. That toy looks really good.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And
is it Kingdom Pipes or Puffer? Isn't it like a Puffer?
no, there's a Puffer as well.
They've got both.
There's a Kingdom Pipes where
both.
he only comes with one of his pipes. So maybe he's just Pipe.
There you go, Pipe.
Well, can you insert like a fossilizer bone in the other one?
His bone pipe.
So pipe and bone, yeah.
Pipe and bone. Pipe and bone man. He's carrying a little wagon behind him, pulling it. It's like Steptoe and Son.
Sorry, everyone.
Go to TF Source.
Anyway, yes, exactly. This has been our sponsor segment for the podcast. There you go. Very professional. But after that, you've really got to go and visit tfsource.com, right? If only out of pity because they're sponsoring us perks. Do you know what I mean? Talking about pipe and bone or whatever. Go and check them out. tfsource.com. They're pretty good.
I'm dead.
We now return to the Transformers.
Let's come on to the Beast Wars cast, because I think that's probably one of the kind of really interesting aspects of this show. And like you, Maz, it was one of the aspects that I was most excited to see, because I really just, I don't know, more than anything, was just super keen to see some of the old favourites in new animation. I just thought, this has got to be fascinating, right? Like, there was a part of me that was slightly dreading it, like, please just be good, please don't cock it up. And actually, I think they did all right with it on the whole. There was a couple of eyebrows raised along the way, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But I don't know, what were your thoughts on those guys?
I liked it. I really did. It was kind of made me realise how, having had no attachment to Beast Wars previously, and then having watched the show and doing the episode, how much I actually cared about the cast and how nice it was to see them there at the same time as the WFC cast, especially like Air Razor and Tigatron, who, from where I saw up to Beast Wars, looked like they had been killed and they weren't in the story anymore. So that was nice. It was almost like seeing friends again in some fashion. But I thought they were really well handled, and I think I probably preferred them to the WFC cast, with the exception of a couple of characters who I thought came across really well. And I wasn't as offended by the VO as I know some people were. The VA. Yeah, the voice acting, the VA. Because I knew it wouldn't be the same cast. I went into that fully aware that it wasn't going to be the same cast. So it was just an interesting, different take. And I really didn't hate Beast Wars Megatron at all in the series. I quite enjoyed how absolutely powerful he seemed. I quite enjoyed that aspect of it. And I really liked... I was happy with it. I genuinely was. I think actually my favourite character in the entire series was probably Air Razor. I think
she was
great. Her character model was utterly gorgeous as well. I think that was the one I felt most inspired to go and buy a toy of. So
it's a nice toy as well.
It looks great. I mean, her character model was stunning, and I really liked her role in the entire series was really nice. Big plus for me, that was.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think when I was doing a little kind of, mental rundown of it, she was the one character I thought, wow, they've really kind of done something with her and made her kind of front and center, which is funny because actually in the original cartoon, I'm not saying she was in the background so much, but she definitely wasn't front and center in Beast Wars, was she? She was kind of, a bit off to the side or whatever. So it's great that actually they did kind of put her a little bit more at the forefront of it in this one, I think. And I agree with you. I think some characters I thought looked better in the animation than others, and I thought she was one that looked fantastic. I just thought the design, everything, and it is a really nice toy, so as well, so that helps. That's one I'm hoping to pick up. Megatron is an interesting one, because I got to say, I struggle with it a little bit. I'm not going to lie. The voice acting on him didn't work for me. I didn't hate it. I'm not like, some people have been, as you said, really offended by it. I have an interesting relationship with some of the voice acting, because like you said, I knew it was going to be new voice actors. I knew it was going to be different to the mainframe show, and I was fine with that. So actually something like Dinobot I really liked, because it sounded nothing like classic Dinobot. It sounded nothing like Scott McNeil, in this kind of raspy thing that you get from the 90s show. And I liked that it sounded completely different. I had a few people saying that they should have swapped the voices of Tigatron and Dinobot, and I was cool with it as it was, to be honest. That didn't bother me at all.
I thought Dinobot had one of the best voices in the entire show. I thought
absolutely
excellent. Like, I like it more than the original Dinobot, because the voice actor doing that was just excellent. Like, everything sounded really good.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think he nailed his lines. He had the right level of kind of sadness to him, but also kind of empathy as well. But toughness, I just thought it was great, really, really good. And again, I liked it because I thought actually the character of Dinobot erred quite a bit from the original portrayal as well, which is interesting because they even took some of the lines of dialogue from the 90s show, but still the character felt quite different. He didn't feel like a rip-off of what we'd already seen.
His death scene had a few classic lines, didn't it?
Very much so. Very much so. Yeah, I mean, they lifted some... They actually took lines of dialogue, some of it directly out. The whole thing about, it being ironic because he's got no choice at all and all that was just directly lifted from the original script. And I don't mind them doing that. I kind of like the homage of it. And I thought that actually on the whole, the death scene was quite well handled and worked. I think it's one of those where it's probably best to not compare it too much. As much as it is a homage, it's probably best to just take it on its own value, because nothing is going to top Code of Hero realistically from the original show. But I still thought it was good. I don't think it's in the same... It's not going to go down in the same league as Code of Hero, but it still doesn't make it bad, if that makes sense. It still did what it needed to do.
It is quite weird. There is something there that's weird. It's like you were saying about him dying and stuff. It was quite well done, but the scene immediately before it, when he runs off with the Matrix, when you see him, he's sprinting away and he looks fine, but the camera hits literally the very next transition is he's limping and on death's door, as if loads of time's passed. And this is a strange thing that happens earlier as well, when Starscream lobs him off the cliff and you see him falling, and in the very next scene it cuts to him and he's just walking through the Stranger Things forest again, or Misty and whatever, and he's just looking around like everything's normal. It is this weird... This is one of the things I was trying to pick up on earlier. There's this weird disconnect sometimes from the way it moves from scene to scene. Because if you watch that scene with Dinobot again, when he takes the Matrix, he's bit his arm off, obviously, but you see the way he moves. He looks fine and healthy. And he runs off, but it's literally the next one. He's like on death's door. It's really strange. Also, fantastic Jurassic Park reference in there, by the way, with the way the Megatron as a T-Rex comes out of shot and picks up the Velociraptor and shakes it around. Yep. I was there in my head going, dun, 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 all of that. And it just holds him. I was like, it's so perfect.
Yeah, it was cool.
Did you get the feeling throughout the show that this was a fan-produced thing? Did you get the feeling that this was very heavily like some of the people who were the writing staff, and they had a very big influence on doing callbacks, and it kind of unfolded the way you expect it to unfold if fans were writing? And that's no comment on the quality, but just rather the content and how it was pitched, and like you say, the references to certain things and the specific lines from iconic characters that were recycled in the show. Yeah,
there's so many references, but the way they're put together feels like somebody's got a show and they've gone, this is my moment to get everything I've ever loved about Transformers into one show. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's because the way it goes through things, there's so many references, and you can tell that people working on it love Transformers, even if there's a lot of things you don't like or a lot of things you disagree with. There's just so much in there that it's really obvious that they are fans.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's very obvious, and in fact, some of them definitely are. Like, there's been a couple of them on Twitter and things like that, and kind of talking about it. And there's, definitely some references in there. I mean, I think that shines through, as we said, with stuff like Dinobot's death scene in there. And there's lots of G1 references in there as well. I don't know, for me, it worked. Like, I think a lot of the nods to the past were pretty good, actually. I don't think they were too ham-fisted. There was maybe a bit too much of it at times, but I thought they strung it together in a fairly kind of coherent story, so I didn't really mind it too much.
I think the way some of it gets a bit distracting, though, because there is so much of it, and it doesn't go in the way you maybe sort of think, not that it should go, but the way that it would flow. Like, the way sort of the Ark is there, and there's all this stuff, it feels like the Ark's only there to get that shot of it, in the side of the volcano, rather than it being there as the Autobot ship that's carried them to being deactivated, because obviously that doesn't happen, but it's all really fast, if that makes sense. And that's kind of one of those things, like, you've got Unicron in there, but he feels like he's there because he's got a toy, and rather than having like a major influence. And there's a lot of stuff like that where, even though it's there, like the Unicron stuff, it's there to foreshadow and stretch the story to probably later seasons, but because there's so much of really major iconography in it, you see it and you know what it is from something else, and so it becomes quite distracting in the way it's strung together sometimes, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, I get that. So, did you spot some of the references right at the start in the first episode? The little flashes that Optimus has. Did you see that?
Oh, yeah, there's little visions of the future.
Yeah, little visions. If you pause it, it's really, really kind of quite weird and cool, actually. Like, if you pause it, he's having these little flashes and visions, and one of them is of his own death in the 1986 movie. So you can quite clearly see it if you freeze frame. There's like the top down shot of that Optimus on his deathbed with like Hot Rod and Perceptor and all of those guys stood round him in a little circle. There's that. But
Ultra Magnus is dead.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, it doesn't make it. It makes no sense in terms of continuity. I mean, it's clearly, it was kind of, is this the future? But it couldn't possibly be the future because there's too many things that don't work in terms of the continuity or whatever. But then there's also a little clip of them arriving on Earth, and I think it's supposed to be possibly Sparkplug and Spike, or maybe even Buster Witwicky from the.
Oh yeah, I've seen screenshots of it.
Yeah, it's not really clear what it is, but it's Optimus and some humans, and there's Bumblebee in there as well. There's a little clip of Menasor, like G1 Menasor, in there, but it's all literally split second stuff, and then it goes. So
I missed all of that.
You would, unless you would. Honestly, you could blink and it was gone. It was just literally like Optimus is chilling out in his bedroom and then suddenly has a couple of little visions and that's it.
I think that's it with a lot of the references, though. What I was trying to say was, like, you sort of see stuff like it almost feels like it's trying to tell you this is a retelling of like G1 and Beast Wars and stuff, but in a slightly different way. But as soon as you start thinking about it, you're like, well, if this is the Ark and it's crashed now, but they've then gone back and flown to Cybertron, does this mean they get back in the Ark, come back, crash, land in the volcano, wake up 4 million years later, then become cars and stuff like that? Because of the toys as well. And it just feels like they're saying it's almost like this was the bit before, and then once they get there, you're like, well, how would they then get back to that bit of the story that it feels like they're trying to say is going to happen in the future? Because Megatron's reading the stuff on the golden disc and stuff like that, and he seems to be talking about the distant future as if he's, the far, far future. So, but in that timeline where they didn't meet the Beast Wars cast and all this stuff, other stuff didn't happen, did they just stay on Earth for like millions of years and then just carry on? What?
Yeah, it's quite open to interpretation, isn't it? I guess. So I must admit, I just took it as a whole other storyline. I wasn't I wasn't really looking for it to tie into anything to do with Transformers past or anything like that. But there were, if anything, it was only because there were so many references in there that you start thinking about it, isn't there? Just because they kind of kept coming back to it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, for me, I wasn't expecting it to tie in or anything, but because it's constantly throwing like little breadcrumbs about other things, but then the second you start thinking about how that applies to what you know, and it's like, but then that couldn't work here because these other things have happened. It's a different timeline. Like I was saying about Skylinks and Earthrise, like when he turns up in a very accurate shuttle with the heat shield around it and stuff, and you're like looking at it going, but this makes no sense as to how this could have possibly ever have happened.
If anything, the kind of whole show almost feels like it was written with the Leonardo DiCaprio pointing meme in mind, doesn't it? Because it's just like people sat at home going, I know what that is. Do you know what I mean? Or like freeze framing it or whatever. So
It's like the writers Oprah going, you get a G1 reference, you get a G1
exactly.
reference. You get a Beast Wars car.
Maximals! Autobots! Maximize! Does that mean transform?
Just coming back to Beast Wars again, because I just wanted to make a couple more points. I was just going to say, the Golden Disc was the funny one for me, because it kind of... I liked some of what they did with the Golden Disc. This was, I suppose for me, sort of symptomatic of kind of the whole show, in that it worked, the Golden Disc, I thought, on its own, just taken as a separate entity to anything else. I liked what they did with it and how they worked it in. The problem for me was that it gets very confusing when you then also have the Matrix and the Allspark and whatever else was a MacGuffin in there as well. And it just kind of felt like there was almost too much mythology and future things and this and that, and hang on, how does that tie into that? Do you know what I mean? And it was kind of, I don't know, that was kind of maybe the thing with the Allspark again, really, that by the time that got wheeled out again and Ultra Magnus is, doing his like flying T-pose or whatever, that it was kind of like, hang on a minute, weren't we just focused on the Matrix a minute ago and that was the big thing, and before that it was the Golden Disc, and I don't know, just almost too many MacGuffins for me, really. But I did think that actually the Golden Disc itself worked quite well.
Yeah, it doesn't let any of them feel important, does it? I think that's sort of the crux of that show, is there are so many of them, you're never really that bothered about any of them. Like the Matrix and the Golden Disc and the Allspark, they all feel very much of a muchness because there's so many, and they're like, this is the ultimate one, but then what's that one? Because I think the Beast Wars cast even say it at one point, don't they? Like they're talking about one of them being the ultimate thing, and they're like, but what about this other ultimate thing? Because I think they're after the Golden Disc, aren't they? And then the Autobots are talking about the Allspark, and they're like, well, what's so good about the Allspark?
Yeah.
That's where DiCaprio's pointing. He's like,
yeah, exactly. That's when the writers are going, hang on a minute. Maybe we should acknowledge the absurdity here a little bit. So
maybe we bring in the Dark Matrix.
Yeah, God, don't. Yeah. Yeah, just a lot of stuff going on. But, I did think it was quite cool that they managed to get in a little shot of Megatron's face. That was another little Leo pointing bit of Megatron's face reflected in the Golden Disc.
That was cool.
Which was the exact same shot used in Beast Wars, actually, in the clip where they're talking about G1 Megatron having, used the disc to send a message back in time. So yeah, that was kind of cool. So there's lots of little nods to Beast Wars in that. It felt to me like the people writing it clearly had a lot of love for the 90s show, quite clearly. And they lifted a lot out of that. And it felt like they... as you said, Maz, actually, I think in many ways they made the Beast Wars cast very likable on the whole. Like, I felt like they really wanted to write for that cast and make them work. Even the stuff like with Rhinox, for example, being like the most capable Transformer who ever lived, yet again, are you a super genius? And all of that.
Yeah. But I felt like I couldn't place what they had based the G1 cast on. Do you know what I mean? I was trying to say, well, it must be maybe like an influence of IDW or something like that. But then again, it wasn't completely consistent with that either.
Yeah.
So, obviously Bumblebee didn't match up entirely to his original G1 depiction, because I think he was a bit more heroic here and a bit more in line with what a modern Bumblebee depiction in a Transformers cartoon would be since the movies. Since Prime, since Robots in Disguise, Cyberverse, that sort of thing.
Wait till you see Siege.
Well, okay, if I'm allowed. Then
no.
Yeah, then Wheeljack obviously seemed a bit more like a mad scientist that like deliberately screws things up, or just is a little bit incapable. Maybe that's quite consistent in a way. Hound, like his appearance was, I wouldn't have equated that to what I know of Hound in previous media that I've consumed. Mirage was quite close, actually, and actually quite loved Mirage in it. I thought that was really cool.
It's funny because I can't even remember Mirage appearing really in Kingdom.
That's because he was invisible, and then he appeared and helped bust Air Razor out. I think it was Air Razor they busted out, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. He's there briefly there.
There in the start, isn't he? When he's got the shield up at the very beginning.
Right.
Yeah, right. And of course, like some of the powers seem different. And I know I sound like a dinosaur because I've probably missed a lot of relevant fiction in between what I know and what was being referenced. But then Mirage, obviously, he was impersonating Astro Train. And I thought, wait, can he do that? I didn't know he could do that. Isn't that what Hound does? But then Starscream was going invisible and stealthy. I was like, wait, can he do that? Is that Mirage who just walked in? No, it was Starscream. Wait, I didn't know he could do that. Okay, I've probably not read a tech spec well enough somewhere. So there was definitely, I was getting feelings like that with the G1 cast, that it didn't completely relate to what I knew of their capabilities or their personalities, and I was trying to place each one, wondering if they were all lifted from one source or whether they had cherry-picked particular incarnations of those characters.
No, I can sympathise with some of that. I actually think that, if anything, the Beast Wars cast felt more well-rounded. They felt more defined, whereas some of the G1 guys just kind of blur a little bit for me. Like, realistically, I remember there was one episode, I can't remember which one, and suddenly Sideswipe has a line of dialogue, and I was like, oh my god, he's still there. Like, I'd completely forgotten that you're even here, mate. Do you know what I mean? You're just like hanging in the background. And that for me was kind of a bit of a fault, because although it was great to see the Beast Wars guys, getting their due, a lot of the G1 dudes were just kind of really sidelined. I mean, RC had quite a lot of dialogue, but she was just really used for exposition more than anything. She was just there to kind of explain what was going on half the time. And
she has no importance to the plot whatsoever, does she? Nothing.
Not really. She just kind of turns up, shoots, does some exposition, and that's that. So, I don't know, it just felt like it was a large ensemble of characters, and they obviously had to balance all of it, which is difficult. But
I really loved Wheeljack. I really like Wheeljack, because he just felt like the cartoon character to me, like everything you know about Wheeljack. It just felt like... And I felt like that's why it was so jarring with characters like Ironhide, when they've got these really young voices. I don't mind different voices, but...
That's a good shout,
He just didn't... There was nothing of the character when he looked so much like the character, if that makes sense. And
Prowl too, actually.
This thing with all the Beast Wars cast felt like the Beast Wars cast. Like, even if the voices, like Optimus Primal sounds a bit different and stuff, but they all felt very in step like that. And whereas the Autobots don't. Some of them do, and I think that's why it's so jarring, because some, like Wheeljack, are so similar to what you remember, but then other ones are so different. Like Mirage is very similar as well. Like, but then you get, like, again, Ironhide, who is just so far off. And then if you'd seen Siege, like, Bumblebees are very much like a very edgelord, isn't he? Sixo in the first series, he doesn't like Autobots. He's all on his own and stuff like that. And it just feels sometimes it's a bit hard to. The show feels like it's trying to get you to settle in by selling you stuff you know, but at the same time chucking really weird stuff that feels completely counter to what it is.
That's 100% it. It's not really one thing or the other. It's not a break from everything that's gone before, quite clearly, because there's tons of references. And like, as you said, some of the characters look identical to how they have done in the past, or they're, whole bits of their plot line is lifted from previous cartoons or whatever it may be. But then there are huge changes as well. So it's kind of like, what is this actually, in a way? Do you know what I mean? Is this something that I'm watching to feel nostalgic, or is this just a completely new thing and I should just get on board? And either of those is fine. I feel like sometimes that works, and again, I would use the example of Dinobot, who to me felt quite different as a character, but lifted a lot of the old Dinobot storyline and had a new voice actor. So there's a real mix there for me of new and old, and I felt like that worked. But other times, I was kind of like, ooh, I don't know if this gels for me or not. It's strange. Yeah.
And with someone like Ironhide, not to keep going back to him, but he doesn't get a chance because he's such a background character. He doesn't get a chance to do anything new, to become something new. There's nothing added to him. So the only thing you really see of him is what he looks like, which is the old Ironhide, really, just with a little bit more Cybertronianness to him. Except for when he talks, and it doesn't sound anything like.
Right, that's it. I think that's it exactly. I didn't need to have more G1 cast in that. I didn't feel like any of the G1 characters should have been used more. I didn't. But when they did say something, some of those inconsistencies with what I knew of them in a show that, like you said, is trying to ground you in recognized past history, it didn't gel for me. I guess they obviously focused on Starscream and Soundwave, Megatron and Optimus. Yeah. And then obviously like the Bumblebee, he did seem just, there was nothing jovial about him, but then that's not the Bumblebee you've come to know in recent media anyway.
This is his cheeriest version as well.
Well, Prowl, in a way, Prowl would probably be the most consistent, because he was almost like very little in the original G1 cartoon, and he didn't have like a very extreme personality in the cartoon originally. So that didn't feel so jarring for me. But I think Ironhide is an excellent example.
Mm. The weird thing, of course, about Bumblebee is that they put him front and centre, especially in, again, some of the previous 2 chapters and that. And then he doesn't even have a toy, does he?
No, this is absurd. Like, in Siege, he's the main character of the show, isn't he? He is genuinely... But he's the only one whose animation model is entirely unique. Or, I can't remember who the other one is. There's another one, I think, where they've got unique animation model. But it's his. It's not a toy. And then he doesn't get a toy until Earthrise, where he's got a VW Beetle, which of course is unrelated to the show in any way, shape or form.
It's such a weird choice, honestly. Like, I just, I think it's cool that they did a VW Beetle toy of him and all of that, but it's just kind of mad. Does he even transform at any point in the 3 seasons of the show? He doesn't.
No.
That's so weird.
For ages, there was this whole, like, oh, well, obviously he was intended for Siege and they chopped him at the last minute and stuff. But then we saw that the Origins Bumblebee, which has got the G1 style floaty car mode, from the cartoon.
The lemon.
Yeah.
It does look like a lemon, it does.
I've always thought it looked like a lemon, yeah.
I never thought of that before. It really does look like a lemon.
It's Frisbee. That's what it is.
Yes, lemon Frisbee.
But like, you see that toy and it looks nothing like the Siege model. So it's not that either. If they made a toy, it's clear that one. It's really strange. It's so strange.
It's a weird one for a toy line that is so closely modelled to the show as well, and it's weird where there are those departures from the toy line to the cartoon. You see it in stuff like, we were talking the other day, weren't we, about the colour of Optimus's boobs, for example, being a bit of a departure, because we were talking about the old 3-0 toy that's now come out that has the green boobs, whereas the Siege toy has blue boobs.
Your video of that was lovely, by the way.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Outstanding.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Your best one yet.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you. But no, it's just weird to me how there's just been so many inconsistencies with the cartoon to the toy line, and it's not even that they haven't featured some of the toys. I get that; it's a very common thing, whatever. But it's just like you said, with Bumblebee being the prime example, where it's just, I don't know what was the logic there. I can't kind of fathom it, really. So
there was an idea there, wasn't there, for ages, that they were keeping Bumblebee out of the Generations toy line, and I think the designers kept hinting at it, didn't they? Because people were complaining about there being too many Bumblebee toys in the movies and stuff, and so I think that was the reason he wasn't in Siege, or maybe that was an influence on it.
Not the bees, eh? Not the bees.
The bees.
I am a warrior. You've shown me that my choices are my own. And yet, how ironic. The cause I want to fight for leaves me with no choice at all.
Okay, so just talking a little bit more about the cartoon itself, what did you guys make of the animation of the show? Because, of course, it was... I think it's interesting to think whether it's a high-budget or a low-budget show, because it looks very polished on kind of face value, but then there are definitely elements of it where you think maybe they were trying to save a little bit of cash here and there. Do you know what I mean? So stuff like My Old Chestnut is always the amount of transformations that occur off screen, for example.
No, I actually looked out for this because of your various complaints in previous episodes.
I think I mentioned it twice.
And one of the first things I saw in the first episode was the Hound model, which is obviously based on the Siege Hound, transform, and I was like, that was awesome. And I thought he looked great. And it just reminded me how much I really wanted to pick up Siege Hound. And I did actually, but then I gave it to someone as a present, so I never actually got to open it and play with it. And there were many occasions where it reminded me of watching a show like RID Car Robots, because the character models looked so much like toys. And I'm realizing now how much of a kick I get out of toy-based models on screen transforming, doing cool stuff. And it inspires me to want to buy toys. So I was thinking when I was watching Air Race, I was like, if the toy really looks like that, that must be a super cool toy to have. And that's something I'd consider buying. So every time I did see very toy-based models on screen, it reminded me what I like about Transformers cartoons. And that was definitely evident in the show. Whereas there were some things like on Prime, he's got that big block on his back. And you were saying in your 3-0 video how that's just something they've added to make it accurate to the cartoon, right? Or to the original WFC toy.
Certainly on the 3-0 toy, yeah.
So that was it's almost like with Prime's animation model, that was a reminder to me why sometimes on screen artists take liberties and don't represent a character entirely like its toy. How they may have taken a bit more stylized view of it and made him a bit more dynamic looking, whereas he looked really bulky and clunky to me sometimes on screen in terms of his character model. But it worked great for I think it was Prowl, and it worked really great for Hound. But then I was seeing elements of Astro Train where he looked supremely clunky and looked a lot like the toy. I was like, but I appreciate that they look like the toys. And transformation wise, there was one part where Starscream landed out of the sky into the Stranger Things forest, and he transformed, and he was sliding, and then a bit more of his transformation took place, and I thought that was awesome. Like that looked really great. So I did feel like there was more transformation in there, and what I did see of it, I really liked.
Yeah, I think some of the character models definitely work better in the animation than others. I think there are some. Actually, it's funny because you mentioned about Optimus, and I have thought that before, that he sometimes looks a little bit clunky on the screen. I think the head sculpt looks amazing. I think they've done a really good job with the head, although the mouth doesn't move enough for me and stuff like that. So it could be a bit of that, but that's by and by. But the one thing that I don't like about the way Prime moves is his abs. He's got
the way they stretch.
That's a real problem.
It's awful.
Yeah, the twisting. Yeah, exactly.
It's so weird. So weird.
Cog in the earlier ones, it's horrible.
Yeah, Megatron does it as well, and it's really off-putting. I find
it's whenever in the walking scenes when they walk towards you. Yeah. I've noticed. I was going to bring that up too. That was the other thing I wanted to say. Absolutely, the abs.
There is a reason for it.
Go on.
And it's not just that it's cheap. And it's something you were saying there about Optimus Prime's backpack and how they look so much like the toy. And it's because someone is probably screaming this right now, but it's because they use the CAD models, the same CAD models as the toys, don't they? That's what they've done through the show. So that's why they all look, because you can see all the 5mm peg holes, haven't they? You can just see they filled them in with like the barest of like design elements and stuff. Just fill those holes. That's all it is. But that's why they look like. That's why they move, because they've basically just taken those and added a little Z brush over the top, give it a bit of polish. But that's really all it is, and I think and I really like that because it feels like the toys I have.
But your toys don't contort that way. Like your toy has a waist swivel. And the entire grill would move to the side, not just the top part of the grill looking like...
You don't know how my toys move when I'm breaking them.
It was like someone had applied free transform in Photoshop, and it just thought skew. Like they'd skewed the middle of him.
It really was. It was someone had got that brush and just kind of like mushed it a little bit. It was just really weird.
There was a funny bit watching Kingdom tonight again, and I noticed the amount of times when Optimus turns his arm, he turns his whole upper shoulder inside, which the toy can't do. So, like, where the Autobot logo is facing in like that. And that's how he turns his arm. And I was like, but he's got the upper bicep swivel. Why didn't they just use that for the arm? And it actually noticed that, and I picked it out. I was like, that's weird. Why am I thinking of that?
Well, we know not everyone can pose toys, don't we?
It's weird with the Optimus model, especially having the 3-0 toy and seeing how articulated that is, and knowing that actually, the design of that thing can be quite fluid based on the 3-0 toy. The bendy abs thing, I just can't get on board with. It killed me. Every time I saw it, I was like, oh, it looks so gross. It looks so weird. Just on Megatron as well, I just thought it was really, I don't know, it just didn't work for me at all.
It's Cog, in particular Cog, in the previous two series. It's awful, because he has nothing in his upper torso, so it just, it's horrible. It's like, it looks like a migraine. That's what it looks like. Everything is melting and moving. Yeah,
it's a bit weird. But I do agree with your earlier point, Maz, that some of the characters, like Astro Train, look a little bit more clunky. Like, it's great that they look dead onto the toys, but it's just, you can see that some of the toys, because as you said, they're all based on the CAD designs, some of them, it benefits them moving a little bit more than it does others, I think it's fair to say. I thought the Beast Wars guys, all the Beast Wars cast, look great, honestly.
They did look fantastic, yeah.
They really suit it.
But I think I'm right in saying, I'm not as familiar with all of those toys, obviously, but I think I'm right in saying that there were a few more liberties taken with some of those designs versus the toys. Is that correct, Liam? Would you say?
Yeah, because I was looking up to the Prime today, and he doesn't look exactly like the toy in the same way the Autobots do. They look identical to the toys, but the Beast Boys cast don't. They do look a little bit different. But it's interesting, because like I was saying on Twitter recently, wasn't I, that one of the reasons I didn't like Beast Wars originally was the animation in the original cartoon. Because to me, it just, even when I saw it back then, it looked outdated. But seeing them in this show, like, I really enjoyed seeing those characters here. And it's weird because when we talk about like the bendy animation and it looking like the toys and clunky for the Autobots, never felt like that with the Beast Wars cast, and I really enjoyed seeing him in a way I never did. They really suit it.
100% agree. I thought all of the Beast Wars cast honestly looked stellar. The way they moved, I thought, was really impressive. I thought the transformations looked good. I thought, stuff like Beast Wars Megatron transforming, I thought looked great.
He did look great.
Yeah, did.
I thought he had a wonderful head sculpt. Like, just the way he was drawn was really, really nice.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very impressive to watch, I thought. And you mentioned Airazor earlier, but even some of the ones that got less screen time, like Cheetor and Tigatron, looked really good again. And I just thought all of it worked, to be honest. So it was kind of interesting. If anything, it made me want just more of Beast Wars done in modern animation. So.
Right, absolutely.
That's what I really liked about it, was seeing those character designs in better animation that was more, I don't know, to my taste, just more modern animation. Let's say that. but they felt so much more dynamic.
Careful.
They just it's something about seeing them more refined. I was like, I'll go that far, and I really liked it.
I get what you're saying. I do get what you're saying. It's more modern, isn't it? For sure. I love the old animation, and will always kind of stick my neck out for it or whatever. But yeah, I did enjoy seeing it. I thought Dinobot looked great as well. But and again, that I think it's kind of almost what you were saying, Maz. I think versus the toys, they took the toys for the Beast Wars characters and just slightly stylized them. If anything, that was kind of based on what I've seen of the toys. They're just not dead ringers for it. They're just like a little bit stylized. But I thought it worked. So I wasn't too sure about Optimus's gorilla mode. I will say that was maybe the only one that I was kind of like, but generally it was all good.
I think Galvatron's nose bothered me a bit.
Yeah.
And all those lines on him, all those lines on his neck. It looks like he was wearing like a thatched roof around his neck.
Man, I saw your tweet about this before I saw the episode, and it was all I could see. I was like, oh man, you just totally ruined it for me, honestly. When you said he looked like he was wearing like a thatched ruff or something, and I was like, as soon as he came on screen, I was like, oh yeah, it really does look like that, damn. I just couldn't unsee it. Like, removed all threat and menace from him for me.
It does. He looks like a pilgrim or something like that. He's got like he's in Little House on the Prairie and running down a hill. He's got that kind of old type American vibe. But there's I think that's something to do with the models, isn't it? Because Megatron's face is similar. It's very, very liney. If you look at his face, it's that kind of one where you kind of want to run your thumbnail over it. It's got that kind of texture.
It's obviously meant to look like brushed metal, isn't it? But it kind of comes across looking like straw almost. It's quite a weird one.
It's really egregious on Galvatron in particular.
Yes, it is.
Of all of them.
It is. Yeah, yeah, it is.
There was one scene I quite enjoyed. Amazingly, I had actually forgotten about... Well, not forgotten. I just didn't think that they would include the Titan mode Ark, Titan class Ark in it. So I just thought the Ark was the Ark. It's the ship. And obviously I know that they've made a toy of the last Autobot. And then he transformed and I was like, that's great, actually. I'm really happy that's happening. That's really cool. And I loved beforehand when their weapons were disabled, Megatron just sort of goes out onto the platform and says, I am a weapon. And
that was super cool.
I like that too. That was great.
That was
and
super
the whole bit
cool.
with Starscream. I thought I liked where his character went in the series. And I liked how he was going to be the one who could hear Unicron and then he was screaming at them to not go through the gate. And yeah, like I said, I would have loved it to end there.
He had a really good arc, Starscream.
Yes.
Yeah, it was very much like, he mentions it, doesn't he? That he feels almost like he's been abused, doesn't he? He's got like a very abusive sort of background, and then he takes control for himself at the end, and I really like that. He kind of, he's not a victim. That's how he sort of plays himself, isn't he? That's what he realizes at the end.
I liked it a lot. I wrote an article on Kingdom, when was it, like a month or so ago, and actually Starscream was one of the bits that I said really worked for me, because I like the fact that he was still him. He was still Starscream. He was still a treacherous, bastard or whatever, but there was almost a reason for him being treacherous. It wasn't just his own self-interest. Like, there was a bit of that obviously at the start, but then as soon as he finds out about the threat of Unicron, I just thought it worked, like how looming that presence was. I also felt that actually Unicron worked for me as a kind of background presence as well. Yep. I feel like Unicron is a little bit overused in Transformers media these days, but here it worked because they kept him just in the background. You know,
Yeah.
they didn't overdo it.
Proper menacing too.
Yes, very menacing.
It's really nicely done. Where I was actually worried at the end of that, what I thought was the last episode, like, it all seems good now, but that's still waiting.
Yeah.
Whereas at the end of the last episode, I almost didn't think that it was going to be that big of a deal that he would turn up. But I don't know, somehow the way he was represented up to that penultimate episode was more impressive. Hey, one more thing. Is it just my imagination, or was there a lot of people always hiding and eavesdropping on others during the series? Was there always someone had overheard something someone had said, whether it was in the ship or in the forest or something? There's always someone.
Yeah, I guess so. Just a lot of, you know, out and out discussing your plans and earshot of other people. Yeah.
It's weird because it either veers from that or to everybody shouting. You know, there's constantly arguing and stuff. There's a funny moment at the start, you know, where the Beast Wars cast just burst into the Ark and start fighting, and you're like, it's kind of like that. Like they either have one mode or the other. They're all like sneaking around and spying, or the yelling. Because that always strikes me in TV shows and films when characters do that. Their first interactions, classic comic thing, is they just start fighting, even though if the only things they have are in common, and it's like they've just seen the Ark crash and their first instinct is to just run on board and beat up whoever's on it. Like, imagine if a bus crashed outside your house and your first instinct was, I better get on there and drop kick the driver. That's what they're doing. It's just like, where does this come from?
There was a bit of that. It was kind of like when they were all fighting and stuff, the Maximals and the Autobots, it was a bit like, just have a conversation, lads, all right? Do you know what I mean? Chill it off. It was.
Do you not think you would clothesline the driver instead of a drop kick?
Maybe, man. If that's your go-to, you know, pro wrestling move of choice, then yeah, why not? Why not?
Inextricably tied to Transformers fiction of the past, I don't know. Something.
Yeah, absolutely. So it would have been fun to see, for sure. That scene was a bit ridiculous in that regard. I guess it was the whole thing, wasn't it, that they thought that he was Nemesis Prime, not Optimus Prime.
But how would they have known?
But he was red.
Yeah.
And he was inside the Ark when it crashed. They couldn't see through it as it was crashing. Like, how would they have known?
True.
I did like Rat Trap though in the cabling and stuff underneath when Wheeljack spots him and he like freaks out. I thought that was brilliant. I really liked that.
Yeah, it was cool. It was a good way to introduce the Maximals and kind of made them seem a little bit distinct. I thought they really kind of stole the show with that. I also loved their kind of heroic moment, you know, and it was kind of like they've got to get the Ark up in the sky and all of that, and the Nemesis is attacking, but it's the Beast Wars guys that like go on the offensive with Black Arachnia as well, which I thought was really nice how they kind of got all of them together, you know, and they kind of go off and save the day. I thought that was really cool, that they got the kind of moment to shine. And
she was really good. She
was great.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah,
really good.
Her Dinobot and Starscream together were fantastic. That was a cool little...
Yeah, cool little trio. And again, the voice acting I thought was really good. You know, and at no point was I sitting there going, oh, you know, I wish we had Venus Terzo back, you know, from the original series, because as much as I do love that voice acting, you know, this felt distinct in its way. It was, you know, it's its own thing. I wasn't trying to compare it. So yeah. But I think it in a funny way, my only issue with some of the voice acting is when they try and do a bit of an impersonation of something that's come in the past, and then it's just not as successful. So I think actually with Megatron, Beast Wars, I didn't mind it being different at all. It was never going to be David Kaye, but I didn't like so much when they tried to do the yes and all of that. Like, I was like, just don't do that. Don't do it. Just why? You know, like you're setting yourself up for failure when you try and do that kind of impersonation of something in the past. And it's a bit the same to me, to be honest, with Optimus, in that obviously they hired the guy because he's well known for doing impersonations of Peter Cullen. If you're going to go with a new voice actor, which is fine, do a new voice actor by all means. It does not have to be Peter Cullen. You know, for my money, David Kaye and Gary Chalk have both done very good Optimus Primes in the past, so it absolutely can be a different voice. But it doesn't work for me so much when you hire someone and have them impersonate what's come previously. That's my only bugbear with it. Like, if you're going to do it different, just do it different.
I bet it's the guy who did The Stand, you know, with that MP1. that American Star. I bet it's that guy.
Oh, MP1 is it?
Yeah, that's just for you, Maz. I like
MP1.
Letters
yeah, exactly.
from the front of numbers.
MP1.
But I know what you mean with Megatron. For me though, just I didn't mind that his voice was different. I just think the real problem with it is he lacked an edge. There's like, you never got the impression he was gonna become like the sort of Beast Wars Megatron, because he's so sycophantic, but not in that Starscream way where you feel like he's scheming. Because when it started, I thought, he's going to have a plan or something. There's going to be something where even if he's, loyal to Megatron now, he's going to have some plan for his own glory. But there's never any hint of that. In fact, it almost goes the other way where you feel like he becomes more of a zealot as it goes along. And I just felt that's what was sort of lacking from his character, because he's not even like Rasputin-esque, because Rasputin, that sort of character, has an angle, and Beast Wars Megatron never really did, and it just was such a weird take that just felt so jarring, because he could have done a different voice, that's fine, but
he was more nutter than villain, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was just like Starscream without the treachery. He just really he's almost like Soundwave. He's got that kind of, he'll do anything Megatron tells him to do. He only cares about Megatron. He's got that kind of, it just didn't feel like, I don't know, he didn't feel like he stood out as a result. He just felt like another one of a minion, so to speak.
He looked super cool in animation. That's the best thing to say about it. I really loved, and like seeing the fight scene with him and Dinobot, stuff like that, seeing him taking on, the guys in the final episode, all of that, I thought looked fantastic. So that's something.
Agreed.
Every time he transformed and charged the screen as a T-Rex, because I think he does it a couple of times, and it's just brilliant. With his mouth open, it's just like, wow, that's cool. It's nice.
Yeah.
That's what these shows are great for. They give you these moments, these things you really want to see, like that, and you're like, this is just cool.
A brave new world awaits us. You could have been a part of it, but you threw it all away.
At least I still have my honor.
So we've talked a little bit, or kind of hinted about toys, and feels relevant to talk about toys on the Toycast. And of course, we've already kind of said that it's quite strange how some of the cartoon deviates from the toy line to some extent. I don't mind that personally, I think that's fine. But it does feel like the strategy here was quite strange, given that the cartoon models, particularly for the G1 cast, are so toyetic. To then not represent the toy line to a fairly large degree is quite weird, isn't it? I mean, let's deal with the elephant in the room, which is that there are so many Earth mode Transformers in the toy line, and yet they only make it to prehistoric Earth, not to current day Earth. I mean, what's the logic there?
I don't know. It feels like I think the toy lines must have their own sort of fictional story that works sort of internally, but we don't know about, because you see with characters like Rodimus Prime show up, and he's doing the Doctor Strange sort of green summoning time travel sort of stuff, and there's a lot of that, and that was the same in like Titan's Return and Combiner Wars. They had their own toy line fiction that wasn't the fiction you saw on the TV show they made. It was always different, and so I think that's what's going on with the toy line. I don't think it's bound to the show. I think they just had the same name and some of the same toys.
No, they've got different agendas completely. They are accomplishing completely different things, and almost for different audiences. The show is supposed to bring in new people to watch Transformers and get into Transformers, and maybe then buy Transformers and become fans. Whereas the toy line obviously is nodding vigorously towards established collectors, and things like that.
It's interesting you say that, though, because when you look at the Netflix show, it feels very much like it's geared toward adults and that kind of audience of Transformers fans that already exists. Whereas the toys also feel like they're doing that with the character choice of all the Generation 1 characters in very G1 modes. And it's like you've got these two things doing the same things but differently, almost. And it's just serving the same crowd but really differently.
That's kind of my thing, and that's why I think it's a bit strange, is that it's not like one of them is going after kids as such and kind of not kind of ignoring, if you like, adult collectors or people that grew up on G1 or Beast Wars or whatever. They're both doing it, but just very differently. And I guess it's weird to not see stuff like Rodimus Prime in the cartoon, as one example, or all of these Earth modes and everything that they've got. It is kind of strange to have a whole sector of whole section of the trilogy called Earthrise that doesn't feature Earth at all. Do you know what I mean? I mean, like, literally Earth crops up in the last 30 seconds of the 6 episodes in Earthrise. Which is really weird. I guess it's strange because clearly there was a kind of, an idea of how the 3 parts of a trilogy could move forward, which would involve them getting to Earth at some point in the present day. But it just kind of never happened. And obviously the writers of the show kind of took it their own way. And I don't mind that at all. But
how would they have incorporated the Beast Wars cast if they had included present day Earth?
I mean, I guess the thing to say is that there's no... I mean, that you'd be completely rewriting the show, but I've never felt that there's a need for necessarily the Beast Wars cast to be on prehistoric Earth. Do you know what I mean? I don't think you need.
So that's what makes me think that they probably did not have the scope and the time to rewrite those characters into a consistent setting with what the toy line was called and what's been established by the toy line names. That's why I think it had to be different, because they're putting in these characters. Yes, they're coming out in the toy line, but they exist in prehistoric Earth. There probably just wasn't time to create a new setting for all of this to make sense.
This is sort of the weird thing with this, though, is because, like, when you see, like, the Beast Wars cast and stuff in the marketing materials, it looks very much like the Autobots have gone back in time. That's the impression you get from that stuff, is there's time travel involved, and they've come back from modern-day Earth in the Optimus Prime is a truck, Soundwave is a tape player, and well,
you're still getting that trucks. With Kingdom stock photography, aren't you? Like the recent Kingdom Road Rage is standing on volcanic ground, which just screams prehistoric Earth, doesn't it?
Yeah, but even the original Kingdom art poster was of like Optimus Prime, and then the Beast Wars cast around him. But the implication looked like they jumped back in time, and because that toy line is, as much as there's Beast Wars characters in it, there are just as many like G1 characters. Like, there are Optimus Prime's back as a truck twice, even though one's an Earthrise toy, but then there's also the core one. Then you've got Tiny Core Soundwave, you've got Trax, Warpath, all the I think Slammers come in from Metroplex and stuff like that. And those toy lines feel like they're still continuing generations, but they're filling out G1, but also adding in Beast Wars. Whereas the show, I don't know, it feels like it's going for a different thing, but with the same toys.
Didn't we get Inferno in Kingdom as well? Like Earth Mode Inferno.
Yeah. Huffer.
And Earthrise.
And Movie Cyclonus.
Yeah.
Which is my favourite Kingdom toy.
I guess what's weird for me is that it's almost like they took the toys from Siege and then wrote 3 seasons about them, but called it WFC, called it Earthrise and Kingdom, but then just introduced the Beast Wars cast. And that's basically what you get, is it's the Siege cast, the Siege toys represented in all 3 seasons apart from Beast Wars. And that's why it's strange. Just in terms of how it represents the overall trilogy of toys, if you like.
How could the scope ever have been bigger when you're looking at 6 episodes per series? And when you've got that many different timelines and toy lines to sort of work into, like, I can just imagine them sitting down at the beginning of that and trying to come up with a realistic scope for what those series could be and what it could include, and how it could never really do justice to the wild variety of the toy line and that sort of thing.
Oh, I don't doubt that that's true, and I think realistically it never could have done. I think that actually, what's then weird is that some of the toys that they did try to incorporate, like Nemesis Prime, for example, which didn't need to be in there at all. Like, what does he actually do that Galvatron doesn't do? If that makes sense, like you could just have Galvatron be the Unicron Herald or whatever. You don't need 2 of them necessarily, but it's just another toy that they did plonk in right at the last minute. And kind of why
wasn't it to sort of represent the wrong end product of Optimus Prime, to sort of,
I guess you're right,
again establish that whole altering of history to not end up in this bad place?
I guess you're right. Yeah, I guess it did sort of work from the perspective of like there's a twisted version of both Optimus and Megatron, isn't there? I guess, yeah. There's
also the Netflix toy line. And Nemesis Prime I think he was in the spoiler pack. I don't know if you've seen those. There are these boxes where they don't tell you what toy's inside, and it's just one. And Earthrise I think that was Nemesis Prime. And I think it's the Siege toy with the Earthrise trailer. That might be Kingdom. It's in one of them.
Well, that's not at all confusing, Liam.
Oh, man. This whole toy line is so confusing.
It's wild. This is where Bumblebee's toy fits in the Earthrise Netflix toy line, not the main Earthrise toy line.
Don't.
And then
makes my head spin.
Yeah, the first one, what was the first one? The spoiler pack was the Ultra Magnus Siege toy in more grey, wasn't it? But with that red rung. Because rung's in there as well, from IDW. That's where you get all the little ramps and stuff from Siege. But the Siege toy line initially was, the way it was spoken of was as if it was before the G1 cartoon. It was before they left Cybertron. So that's why all the Optimus Prime looks like as close to an Earth truck as he can. As, like in the cartoon, they just look like the Earth modes on Cybertron at the start. The first Siege felt like it was trying to tie that up, if that makes sense.
I don't know what you're talking about. Soundwave was a lamppost.
But he looked like a tape player. that turn into a lamppost.
I did have to laugh at the siege ravage in Kingdom because he was still very much, oh Lord, he coming, wasn't he? On the screen.
If he had a voice, it'd be Terry Crews, wouldn't it?
He's a heckin' chonker.
Maybe just change it a bit, you know.
Yeah, he's funny. It's a funny little thing.
I did think it was really cool the way Laserbeak brought down Air Razor towards the start. I mean, I did really enjoy that scene. That was cool.
I did think that was cool. But yeah, I don't know how they could have represented more of the toy line, and I don't pretend to have all the answers to this stuff. It just strikes me as a bit of a strange one to do. Like you said, Liam, something that started in such a place where it was so close to the toy line and so accurate, and then it's almost like they've just kind of deviated on different paths.
Like a lead time on production for the show, like from when those toys are revealed or how soon they were getting the models, because like we're talking earlier about Bumblebee and he's in the Siege show, but look, he's the only model that looks nothing like a toy, so it's very rare that they did anything else. So maybe they just had those original Siege models and they must have been making Kingdom and Earthrise instantly afterwards they've finished each one.
Think of the bandwidth and lead time required to then create a whole new animation model off those CAD files for updated things that maybe the toys are just coming out onto the market now, and it's completely understandable, I think.
Okay, I've got it. Here's how you do it, right? Here's how you make a cartoon that features all of those toys. This is what you do. So firstly, 2D animation. So, old school. And but then just do it in an RID 2001 style, where you get like Megatron and he's suddenly like, aha, but here are my fossilizers. And then suddenly the fossilizers like come out of nowhere and they're all like, fossilizers go! And then suddenly they're doing their thing and you get a little montage with stuff flying in off the screen and like all of that. And, suddenly they're combined and then someone else says, oh no, it's, so-and-so, and they're doing their thing. And you just throw them all in there and get them to announce themselves and just like have a big battle. And I don't know, that would be kind of fun.
I would love that. Be like, oh no, it's Bonio and Juliet.
Exactly. Do you know what I mean?
That's another thing though, like the fossilizers form such a major part of that Kingdom toy line.
Excuse me. We've just had Bonio and Juliet. Where did that come from? Have you been sitting on that all night? Did you just come up with that?
Literally just popped into my head when Sixo said fossilizers as we were talking about it. I don't know.
Bonio and Juliet.
Just thinking of RC palling about with Springer's corpse, but as a dinosaur.
There's a t-shirt for you.
Right.
But there's like fossilizers. They're such a part of that toy line.
But that's what I mean. And something like the RID 2001 cartoon would have just gone balls to the wall with just getting all that stuff represented on screen, right? Like it would have just gone for it. It would have just been like fossilizers everywhere, transforming every 2 seconds.
I'd completely forgotten about the fossilizers till you mentioned them, though. So that's how weird that, like, watching the show, it's completely a non-entity because they're not in it.
How are you going to do that show and not have fossilizers turn up, right? Like, that's my only thing. Like, I did enjoy Kingdom, and it's quite a serious show in its way, but part of me did kind of miss the kind of levity of, like, just some of these like really mad toy concepts having to be explained. Do you know what I mean? Like the way that
just not sure Bonio and Juliet is the way to do it.
Well, maybe not for a kids show, but once again, get Liam to write the show. That's all I'm saying.
I'm telling you, Netflix, if you want a pole position or Jason the Wheeled Warriors reboot, come to me.
Good Lord. I reckon he's just like Alan Partridge with his little dictaphone going, new Transformers idea, fossilizers, Bonio and Juliet.
Yeah. I do like Jurassic Park, so...
Yes, that's very true. But I think, you somewhere in my mind, there's a very, very different, more cartoony, more probably child-centric cartoon that would have just thrown in everything from the toy line into one big soup and just let it happen. I don't know, in whatever kind of crazy way. And not really kind of given so much of a fuss about the lore and the plot and the Allspark and all of that kind of stuff, but just like had fun with it.
So you want to double trigger the fandom by not paying attention to the lore and making it cartoony and funny. That's your strategy then.
I think it'd be fun.
Not serious business.
Yeah, I think it'd be fun to see. Everyone would lose their minds about it.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, I know. It'd be great. It'd be something to talk about.
It's a King Kong adventure.
That's what it should be called. It's hard to know now what what the sort of next cartoons will go to, though, isn't it? Because we've had a kind of succession of kind of grim and gritty cartoons, really. Like, we've had a number of them. But then we've also had previously some, what I think were some quite good shows, with stuff like R.I.D. 2015. Maz, I know you really enjoyed that one as well.
I loved it. Absolutely loved it, yeah.
But it's so different to this in its way, isn't it? Because it was nothing like the toy line at the time, but just like a lot of fun, really. And I'd be up for a bit more fun with whatever comes next, I think.
Do you think that's the crowd this is going for, though? Because we were saying like how Siege was so similar to the toys, and it feels like as it's gone on, it's almost, we always say these shows are toy adverts, aren't they? But this doesn't feel like that at all, because Earthrise and Kingdom almost entirely ignore the toys, so many of the toys. So it feels like it's the writers have taken it on as something else, if that makes sense, rather than it being a mandated thing. And on the way it's pitched on Netflix as well, it's not pitched as a children's show, is it? It's very much targeted toward adult fans and collectors, those, an older crowd.
I can tell you now, my boy, I haven't even tried him with it, but he'd be bored. He'd be bored to tears if I tried to show that to him, honestly. And that's not a slight on the cartoon at all. It's just not... There's too much plot, too much talking, too much philosophizing, all of that. It just wouldn't gel. He's too young for it, ultimately.
Too many people are in a mood.
Yeah, exactly. Too much kind of pondering and stropping and shouting and all of that. It's just, it doesn't have that kind of levity that you kind of need necessarily to hold young minds, does it? I think. If anything, it feels a bit more teenagery in that respect. And again, that probably sounds like a diss, and I really don't mean it as a diss. It's just it is kind of hard to see what it's targeting in that regard. Do you know what I mean? But
Boneo and Juliet were teenagers.
You're not going to let that go now, are you? That's
How can you?
Yeah.
I'm now thinking about how we can do a whole episode of like Shakespearean themed Transformers references. Who's Mercutio? Is that Springer?
Okay, so Liam's off on one.
Should we talk about some Kingdom toys, though? What's the Air Razor toy like?
Really good. Yeah, really, really good. Like it a lot.
Is it representative of the on-screen model, do you think?
Yeah, for the most part. Again, it's still slightly stylized a bit, like all of them, I think. But it's, it looks sort of there or thereabouts. For me, it's a really nice representation of the character as a whole. I think they've kind of, it's almost like that kind of, it looks a bit like the old show, a bit like the new show, a bit like the original toy, all kind of melded in, if anything.
Do you know where they missed a trick with it, though? Because in the show, she flies like Iron Man, doesn't she? With, like the little hand thrusters and the feet thrusters. She moves like that. And it's like, these toy lines have all these blast effects, and they didn't mold the hands open of the feet with like peg holes. And you're like, that would have been so perfect for that compatibility.
It's a good call.
Yeah, that would have been cool. That would have been cool. Missed opportunity. There you go.
Yeah.
But no, it is a nice toy.
I've got the Skywarp as well from the Battle in Time set, which is a Kingdom toy line called Battle in Time, where Sideswipe turns into an Earth Lamborghini again. So, it doesn't quite fit. But the Skywarp's really nice. Like, I got that tonight, as we were talking about earlier, and it's lovely.
I think it's so mad that they're doing toys like that as well. Do you know what I mean? That homage relatively niche Beast Wars characters. I mean, of course, I would still think of it as Silverbolt. As soon as I saw you post that, I was like, oh, it's Silverbolt from Magnaboss. But of course, it's the Japanese name, but Skywarp. But still, I think it's super niche that they're doing that. And it's got to be said, that whole War for Cybertron toy line, all credit to them. Some of the stuff they've cooked up, it's just absolutely insane. It's like a collector's dream come true, really, isn't it? Every time there's a new reveal, it's like some obscure character from however many years ago.
So why doesn't Cyclonus appear in Studio Series 86? Why is he positioned in the Kingdom toy line? Because it doesn't really fit with the Kingdom aesthetic from what I can see. And
Scourge is in Studio Series.
Yeah, and this is not just because of who the character is, but because of the way the toy is constructed and just looks like it was destined for Studio Series 86. So does anyone know what the thinking was to put it in Kingdom?
To me, it feels almost like they were overflowing with these toys at the same time. I don't know if some of them feel like they would have just been in the Generations line, if that makes sense. But then you look at a Hot Rod and a Grimlock, and they don't feel like the same, do they? No. As those toys. Like, you couldn't get that Hot Rod in that toy line, so it's...
I don't think the Cyclonus is the same either. I think it's everything about it just says this is the best movie Cyclonus we could possibly make.
It does, but then it's got like the pegs, like the random pod pegs for the rockets and stuff like that. Because I remember when the leaks were coming out, people were like, "Oh, it's a studio series," but like you could tell straight away because you can see those random pegs all over it that are for those blaster.
He's got one on his chest, doesn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, and that throws it off from being those, and it. I don't know. There's just this idea because Galvatron is in Kingdom, obviously, like he's in the show, but
that looks
why is he not
like
in 86?
That's the thing. Galvatron does not look to me how a studio series Galvatron would look. No. He looks to me like the latest generation's version of Galvatron. And the same with Commander Rodimus Prime. That does not look like a movie Rodimus Prime attempt to me. It just looks like the best Rodimus Prime they can do in a Generations toy line. Which is why Cyclonus really stands out for me. Because it doesn't feel that way.
But his studio series is still Generations ultimately though, isn't it? It's all still part of the same whole.
Don't say that. The movie fans will come for you.
It is though, isn't it? Realistically, it is. It is.
It is part of the same whole. But I felt like decisions were made for those toys, which were movie inspired, or the weighting was more towards movie being the decision maker for design choices rather than Generations and that sort of thing. If you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, no, I do. And now, of course, you've got Earthrise Starscream being repackaged with a new hat for for studio series and stuff, which is causing a lot of controversy, isn't it? A lot of people hate that. Although, what did people really expect? To be honest, like not to sound on the nose or whatever, but it totally makes sense to me. Do you know what I mean? They've got a very successful toy. People like it. Put some new stuff with it. Repackage it. I don't know. It makes sense to me. You don't have to buy it, but it's. I can see why they've done that. But I think I just wonder if maybe they just view it as all part of the same thing, realistically, but actually kind of putting the characters in one line or the other kind of encourages you to want to buy both. Because you must have people that are completists or whatever that are tearing their hair out with this stuff, right? Because if you want your complete studio series lineup, but you don't collect Kingdom, well, what do you do? Do you know what I mean? Do you just ignore those toys like Cyclonus and Galvatron, or do you go for them? It's
that Cyclonus toy is not possible to ignore it. It is a phenomenal toy. Like it, I was saying how I thought Studio Series Hot Rod was my favorite toy of the year of the 2 or 3 modern toys that I buy. But I'm actually thinking in hindsight, because I sold my Cyclonus, and now I'm thinking I actually really missed that toy, and I think it was actually better because I don't automatically reach for that Hot Rod to transform it now because I know it's a tiny bit of a faff to get it into car mode and everything lined up. But that Cyclonus toy, I would reach for it time and time again, and I'd look forward to transforming it constantly. It was a remarkably good toy, and it is just a phenomenal toy.
I could honestly, happily never transform Studio Series Hot Rod ever again at this point.
You've had to do it a few times recently, though.
Oh man,
that's why I bought 2 to save myself.
Yeah, well, it's just my boy is currently his current fascination. Absolutely loves that toy, which is great. That and Earthrise Optimus. He can transform Optimus, no problem. So that's all good. But Hot Rod is just, for some reason, he just has a little bit of difficulty with getting it into the car mode. And then again, like with the going back into the robot mode, it's the spinning around and stuff of the chest that he's just a bit like, what is happening here? So I've had to do it. I mean, in the last week alone, several dozen times, I don't know, but which I know it's like first world problems and all, do you know what I mean? What a terrible problem for a Transformers collector. But I'm just kind of like, now I'm at the stage of like, hey, do you want to look at this latest 3-0 effort or something like that? It doesn't transform. It's really fun. Let's have a look at that one, shall we? Just because I'm like, please don't ask me to transform Studio Series Hot Rod again. I mean, I'm joking really, because it's nice that he wants to get interested in them and all that. Of course it's great, but yeah, I'm just kind of over that transformation now.
There's something about that Hot Rod, though. My daughter took to it so much, and it was the articulation of it and the way that she could make it so expressive that she absolutely loved. It's a really tremendous toy on so many different levels.
He loves it. He absolutely loves it, which is, it's a great toy.
The proportions on it are incredible. Like, it doesn't have, at any point you look at it and it feels like, like a lot of Transformers, even when they've got good proportions, there's still a box in there somewhere, and there are little bits that sort of hide stuff, whereas this doesn't feel like that.
Some kind
of
compromise,
Yeah. Whereas the Rodimus Prime is really nice as well, just to get that in there.
Well, it was nice to see that the on-screen depiction of Kingdom Galvatron had feet. That was good. because I think that's important for a robot and a general humanoid-shaped robot.
That looks so different to the Kingdom toy as well, though. That's another one where
Massively.
the animation model is
Jeez,
not that toy. And like, he looks like really sort of stretched and different, doesn't he? It's not.
He's very stylized, very kind of elongated and lanky almost. But it worked for me. I did, other than the fact that he looked like he was wearing a straw ruff.
A straw bib.
Yeah, exactly. Other than that, quite liked it.
Unleash the power of the animal kingdom with new Transformers Kingdom figures. Convert from beast to robot mode and rule the battle. Two epic worlds collide with new Transformers Kingdom figures, each sold separately.
Right, so of course lots of discussion to be had on Kingdom, and realistically speaking, there's only so much that we can talk about in one episode. So if there are things that you think we've not covered today and would like to hear more about in the future, just let us know. But for today, what was the kind of final verdict then, gentlemen, on Transformers Kingdom? Did we like it? Not like it? What do you think?
I liked it a lot more than I thought I would, but with obviously all the caveats that we've talked about. So, I mean, I would watch it again, I think.
Okay, that's good. That's a good sign.
And it made me want toys, which is ultimately my entire existence with Transformers. So
yeah, exactly.
Job done, I guess.
In a very real way, that's a metric of success for a Transformers show, isn't it? If it makes you want to buy the toys, then it can't be all that bad, can it? So, Liam?
I think coming out of Siege and Earthrise, I went into this with such low expectations, where it was a rare time with a Transformers cartoon I wasn't actually looking forward to. There was a bit of like, but I was always gonna watch it just to see if it was like a train wreck or anything. But actually, I thought it was all right, and I would actually go as far as to say I enjoyed it. So, there was that. And I've got to shout out the guys on the Transformers The Show podcast on YouTube, because they had me on. So, Andy, Paul, JB, that other guy whose name I can't remember, who has that real messy desk. I think his name was Roddy Piper or something like that.
Bonio.
Bonio. But they asked, we were talking about it on there, and it was the first day it came out, and I was quite dismissive because I hadn't enjoyed it, and I gave it a 4 out of 10. And in hindsight, I regret that now, because I think it's definitely a solid 5 at the worst, to maybe a 6. So, and in the end, I enjoyed it because the Beast Wars cast really carry it, and there are a lot of things to like in there.
I think it's a bit the same for me, to be honest. I was kind of like, I went into it genuinely with a slight sense of dread, but curiosity to see, and it was really just because it had the Beast Wars cast in it that I wanted to see it, and I feel like it hugely benefited from that change in setting. My wife and I had watched all of Earthrise and Siege, Siege and Earthrise, I should say, together, and she literally was just so tapped out by that point. Do you know what I mean? When going into Kingdom, but actually I really enjoyed it, and I think on the whole, it's got major faults. It's not perfect by any means, but it's not bad, really. In the grand scheme of Transformers media, there's been worse. Do you know what I mean? Let's say that. And of course, if there are things that we haven't mentioned today, just let us know on social media if you think there's anything that we've missed, because it's by no means a comprehensive take on all the toy line and the cartoon and everything. But do let us know. We are on Twitter and Instagram as @triple_takeover, @triple_takeover. And we're on Facebook as well at Triple Takeover, just for a little bit of confusion there for you. We're also on Patreon @Triple Takeover as well. And if you do want to support the podcast, then you can go to Patreon for all kinds of great perks. We've now got quite a few Patreons, actually. We only launched it a couple of months ago, and it's doing really well, so that's very exciting. Lots of hopefully happy patrons, as they're called. All kinds of great perks. You can get early access to episodes, so you get them a full, 5 days early. You get you in one of the higher tiers, you get what I think is the best perk of all. You get access to exclusive mini-sodes, which we record as frequently as we do the main episodes anyway. We do all kinds of little weird and wonderful topics. You get to vote on things, all kinds of great stuff. Outtakes, loads of it. Absolutely brilliant. So do get yourself signed up on there. If you want more of us talking, if you can handle such a thing, then check out our Patreon @Triple Takeover. And Maz, we've got a bit of a shout out, don't we, for some of the old butlers, Sixo's butlers?
Yeah, for anyone who signs up as a Sixo's butler tier patron, we do a shout out on the show. So I want to thank Nick, Jonathan False Logic Howard, Dean Watts, Danny Roberts, Chris C137, Andy, Cannon, Preston, Brian Fox, Chris, Billy Ho, Spider Father, Adam Shoemaker, Zachary Blader, and Timu Toivonen. So you can see there's quite a few people who reckon it's worth it. And don't forget, guys, if you are on the Sixo's Butler tier, check your Patreon messages, because we have gotten in touch asking you to give us some ideas for what minisodes you'd like. So we do minisode commissions, and we do episodes that we want to cover as well. So that's a major perk. And if you want us to thank you on the show in a different way than we have, again, just get in touch and let us know how you'd like to be thanked.
There's something immensely satisfying about hearing you reading off that list of names. I don't know what it is, but every time you do it, I just take a slight bit of delight in it. I don't know why. So,
well, we've got one Sixo's Butler who keeps signing up and then deleting every time it gets to time to pay. I'd be really happy if
that person needs
if
banning.
that Pratt doesn't come back. I'd be really happy. Calls himself Sixo as well. Can you imagine the cheat?
I was wondering if you were going to out me. It's just because there's no way of testing some of the functionality. It's so annoying. It's Patreon anyway. It's my personal
Anytime my
grumble.
Gmail goes off, is it this alert telling me that you've signed back up?
I know, honestly. Even bloody got charged for it this month, didn't I? I forgot to delete it before the end of the month. Never mind. All in the purpose of making it good. That's the idea. Final shout out for us today, very important one, is TF Source again, because of course they are helping us to keep the podcast going by sponsoring the whole thing. So thank you very, very much to them. Do check out tfsource.com for all your Transformers and third-party needs. Plenty of Kingdom toys on there, as I already mentioned. So thank you to them. Otherwise, lads, where can they find you?
I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all those things at Toybox Soapbox.
I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at TFsquareone.
And I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at SixoTF. That's it from us today. Thank you very much for listening, and have a good one.
Excuse me. We've just had Bonio and Juliet. Where did that come from?